We know that there was another move on a hospital in Gaza City in the last several days, and Rafah, of course, remains a question, as it seems that Israel, Netanyahu specifically, still is indicating the number one priority is to take out Hamas to the extent that they can. Do we have an understanding, Hagar, of just how close they are to accomplishing that goal?
It's a little difficult because the U.S. has come out, the U.S. officials have said that they believe that the Israeli military has taken out about a third of Hamas's fighters. And Israel has said things that are a bit similar to that. Actually, maybe they inflate those numbers a little bit more, but it's a little bit complicated because on one hand you have the U.S. saying that, and I, having worked in the U.S. government, obviously I have a reason to believe when the U.S. comes out with these figures, they don't say that unless they're pretty certain of them. But also the part that's complicated is the fact that you have Netanyahu coming out and saying that they're at the tail end, and he said that. He said we're at the very end. We just need to go into Rafah, and we need to control Rafah, and then we're at the end. And I want to be clear, when he says that, what he means is that they're after Rafah, after an operation in Rafah, which would be the last area, city that is not under Israeli military control, that operations might transition to something that's lower intensity, but that the entire war wouldn't end. The effort to undermine Hamas, to go after its fighters, wouldn't end. From what I can see and have studied, it's that you still have those tunnel networks are very active in supporting Hamas and keeping them alive. Apparently their warfare at the moment, while they are definitely on the other end of, they are losing, Hamas is losing, that's very clear. What they've been doing now is retreating in tunnels, and they'll pop out, they'll do an attack, and they'll retreat again. And so that is what the Israeli government is focused on. And the way the Israeli government sees this is they cannot just retreat right now. Because if they did, then everything that has happened thus far, without defeating Hamas's ability to launch attacks, to govern Gaza, then everything would have been for nothing. And that's how the Israeli military sees it. That's how the Israeli government sees it. So while I believe Netanyahu in that when he says that the end is near, what he means is that for the high intensity part after Rafah happens. But I don't want to make it sound as though that wouldn't have severe humanitarian consequences, because it would.
Right, sure. Hagar, there were reports a couple of weeks back that Israel was beginning to flood the tunnels beneath Gaza with seawater. Is that how this ends?
Some of them have been flooded with seawater. Some of them is the Israeli government has called in Israeli engineers to also come in and dismantle or destroy some of these tunnels. From what they say that this won't end until they've destroyed all the tunnels, and I believe that because they don't invade Gaza often. They haven't been physically in Gaza since 2006, 2005 when they left, and given the threat in October 7 and what they faced, they feel that they must dismantle everything that supports Hamas, that props them up, that would keep them living. And you can tell that the U.S. government agrees with that somewhat, because otherwise the U.S. would be calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire right now. And they're not. They're calling for a temporary one because they want to get some hostages released. They want to gain some time so that maybe they can lay the groundwork for a permanent ceasefire. But that permanent ceasefire could only take place if Hamas isn't governing Gaza. So they want to create the space for that in a way that doesn't create such humanitarian devastation and catastrophe. But at the end of the day, both sides agree on the need to defeat Hamas completely. It's just that the U.S. would like to see it in an approach that protects civilians as much as possible.